All right, let's go ahead and welcome in our guest who joins us now on the hotline, and that is the great Chris Price of the Boston Globe, who is making his debut here on the Christian Arcand Show. Mr. Price, it's been a while since I've talked to you on the air, really at all. It's great to have you. How you doing?
It's great to be back with you, Christian. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. I think you and I did a show on EEI once. It was one of my first on-air gigs. It was the Sunday show, and I came. You remember that? I came in like 2 segments in. You remember what I'm talking about?
You literally, yeah, you were, and I forget who, because I did that show for, like 8 years or something crazy like that, like 7 or 8 years, and I worked with roughly 500,000 different people on that show, and so I don't remember off the top of my head.
Someone didn't show up, and Zarbano called me, so you got to get down here and host with Price. I said, okay, sure.
It was literally like, keeping with the football analogy, you were a quarterback. You were the backup quarterback who came in literally like 3 snaps into the game and carried us the rest of the way to what was surely an easy victory. So, yeah, I think that's the only time we were together, but we've talked like this before.
Certainly.
A bunch of times where I've kind of tried to give some sort of insight into something or other over the years. I think that's the only time we were together in studio. That's remarkable.
I think that's true. Speaking of giving your insight, it was a big day for the Patriots and a big day for Robert Kraft. He had a lot to say, so let's just dive right into it. We'll start with the Parcells thing. Do you believe Parcells should be in the Team Hall of Fame? Why or why not?
Yeah, he should. He should. And I say that with the full knowledge that people are going to be pissed, and people probably have a right to be pissed. But when you look at the bottom line and what he did when he was here, I think, between him and Drew Bledsoe, he certainly restored a sense of relevance to the franchise. And, he was one of the first guys. He was one of the first 2 or 3 guys. And look, I know they had success in the 70s and 80s, but to really kind of jumpstart what you could consider to be the modern era in New England. And again, I get why people are pissed. I get why people, because he fundamentally spent that last year kind of plotting, a way out of town. But for what he did up to that point, I think it makes an awful lot of sense. I
think it makes sense for him to be in too. What I didn't realize was that Robert Kraft could have just snapped his fingers all these years and put him in as a contributor. I didn't know that. He did all these fan votes that didn't go his way, and all these other people getting in, and Kraft could have done this all along. Why do you think he did that today?
Oh, you know what? I have a conspiracy theory that this is one of the things that he wants to do before he decides to kind of not give up the day-to-day control, but it's about mending fences, and it's about taking care of family business, and he can see the end of his career as an owner, and so he wants to kind of check this box and make sure this relationship is right. So
it's like a presidential pardon, kind of, right? He's like giving him a pardon before he leaves office.
Yeah, exactly. And he did this. He did. I think it was with Gil Santos and Dante Scarnecchia and Tracy Sormonte, the head of the cheerleaders, who was. I think those are the 3 people that he kind of. Basically kind of preempted everyone else and said, look, these people are going in. This is my Hall of Fame. These people should be in the Hall of Fame. And you could add Parcells to that list. And so, look, it's, at the end of the day, it's his team, man. It's his team. It's his franchise. It's his Hall of Fame. So he has the ultimate say when it comes to something like that.
There's been a lot of reporting, obviously, from ESPN and everybody else about the big media blitz that Robert and Stacey James, as an extension, had to try and get him into the Hall of Fame. How it hasn't worked for him so far. What did you sort of think about all that? What did you make of it? And do you think that Parcells being put into the Patriots Hall of Fame, maybe there was some sort of connection there with Kraft and his own quest to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
That's a good question, Christian. I don't think the two were necessarily connected. The one thing I can tell you is I've talked to a lot of Hall of Fame voters over the years for a bunch of different stories. I'm a guy who pounds the table for Rodney Harrison and Vince Wilfork and saying, look, these 2 guys deserve to. And I try and talk to these voters, and I ask why they are not in. And sometimes voters for the Hall of Fame don't necessarily like it when you not preach to them, but they're very mindful of legacy. They're protective of the Hall of Fame, and they don't like it when people say, "Hey, this guy should be in the Hall of Fame." They like to make up their own mind. So I don't know. I think that Robert Kraft belongs in the Hall of Fame when you look at the body of his work and you look at what he's accomplished here in New England over the years. You can argue about contributor, how much, part of the credit he deserves for, the run of 20 plus years and all that. But, when you stack him against, this is the argument that I make with position players, that you need to stack them against other people who are already in the Hall of Fame. And if Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame, Robert Kraft certainly deserves a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I certainly agree with you there. And I know Adam Schefter agrees with you, too. It's the most angry I've ever heard him in my life was when he was yelling and screaming about why Robert Kraft didn't get in. And that, what was the guy's name? Happy Jones or whatever his name was who got in instead. I forget what his name was.
It is. And that's for me. I mean, and that's the bottom line. And I'm lucky enough to be someone who's on the nominating committee for the Patriots Hall of Fame. And we come across, and I'm not going to equivocate the two, but I think that when you look at the people who are in and you say, okay, well, that's the bar, that's the measuring stick, those are the qualifications we want to use to put a guy in the Hall of Fame, or a man or woman or whatever in the Hall of Fame. It's the same thing. And again, I'll go back to the Jerry Jones thing, where if Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame, Robert Kraft deserves to be there as well.
Agree with you there. Robert talked about the succession plan. He was asked a question, I think, by Bedard about it, and he answered as though the question caught him off guard, which is an interesting reaction for an 84-year-old man to be asked about, what the next step is with the team and, your ownership and all of that. But he didn't seem like he was going anywhere or that he wasn't planning to.
No, I don't think he is either. I think that he's going to continue to kind of, ride it out as long as he can. I think that we're going to see more of, not an outside influence, but we're going to see Jonathan, kind of move more into the day-to-day. I don't know if that's more from a public standpoint, but, it feels like it's appropriate, given his age, to be able to kind of make that transition smoothly. And look, this, it's when you look at Robert in his first years in the league, and he wasn't a finished product as an owner. And, we could point to, the first coach that he had, Bill Parcells, and I know a lot of people have the same sorts of suspicions about Jonathan, if he's ready for the job, if he'd be up for the job. I think it took Robert a while to grow into the job, but I think it might take Jonathan a while to grow into the job. But I think for the short term, we're going to see Robert. I think long term, it's going to be interesting to see Jonathan's fingerprints on this football team and how they manifest itself both at the box office and on the field.
We're talking with Chris Price of the Boston Globe. Chris, shifting the focus a little bit towards the team right now in this offseason, what do you think of what they've done in free agency so far, and who are they going to draft at 4th overall? Are they going to draft anyone at 4th overall?
I think that if Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter are there at 4th overall, they run the card to the podium and they don't look back. I think if either both of those guys are gone, I think they're going to want to trade down. Whether or not they'll be able to find a trade partner is another matter altogether. I think that there's some other guys who would be good fits on this team, but would be probably considered overdrafts if they took them at number 4. Folks like Ted McMillan, I think Ted McMillan would be a good fit on this team, but I don't think they should take Ted McMillan at number 4. If they end up sticking at 4, you're probably going to see some sort of combination of Will Campbell, Mason Graham, and maybe another 1 or 2 guys who are part of that conversation. So I think, short answer to your question, if Carter or Hunter are there at 4, they take them. I think that's a capper on what is a very exciting and very interesting offseason for this team. But if both those guys are off the board at 4, really all bets are off. I think overall, I think they've done well this offseason on the defensive side of the ball. They haven't done enough to address the needs on offense, but there's still time to do that between now and Labor Day.
What do you think of Steph Diggs the other day?
I loved it. I do. I love it. And I've been talking to people, and I can kind of, bait the hook here by letting people know that I've been working on a bigger feature story on him.
Right.
Really over the last couple of days. I did not go down to Florida for the owners meeting specifically because I'm working on this thing. And I'm fascinated by his development and what he's done over the course of his career. We don't, and I'm talking about kind of the general we as football fans, media, I don't think we give him enough credit for being a tough guy, someone who survived in this league for 10 plus years, has put up the numbers that he put up. He's never had a serious long-term injury, but when he's had injuries over the course of his career, I go back to college, he had a lacerated kidney, he had a sprained ankle. That kind of mental toughness that he developed through those injuries, playing through those injuries, I think has manifested itself over the course of his career. And I think the Patriots are getting a guy who is going to be who's going to answer the bell every single time. I know that there's some conversation out there about how he might be a distraction if he doesn't get the requisite targets. I think he's reached the stage of his career, and I've kind of gleaned this from the people that I've been talking to. He's reached the stage of his career where he is easing into kind of a mentor leadership role. He understands what he needs to do here in Foxborough. He knows that he is not necessarily going to be on the front of a duck boat rolling down Boylston Street celebrating the next Patriots Super Bowl, but he is comfortable being able to be the guy who helps set this team up for the next phase of success.
Chris Price, Boston Globe. Before we let you go, Kraft today said that a measure of success for this team this upcoming season, and I know the offseason is still to be determined here with the draft, but he said that a measure of success would be if they made the playoffs. Do you agree with that? Do they have to make the playoffs to be successful next year?
No. And look, I've been accused of being, a bit naive here, but I don't think a playoff berth is necessarily in this cards. I think if everything goes perfectly for them, they're playing meaningful games after Thanksgiving. They're playing important games after Thanksgiving. And ultimately, I think that's going to translate to, say, 6-7 wins. I think that, the improvements, especially on the defensive side of the ball, are good. Drake May, you're going to need to have him take another step forward as an individual, as a leader, as a potential captain of this team. And then the third thing to keep in mind, I hate basing it on last year's schedule, but this year's schedule is really easy. There are no West Coast trips. There's no trip to London. I think they only play a couple of games outside the Eastern time zone. This schedule sets them up for success. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team like I referenced before, but when you look at everything that's kind of come together, I think 7 wins for this team would be a big win for them, a big victory for this franchise. What they need to do then is continue to set themselves up for success in 2026. They need to be able to show improvement. They need to be able to reach that 6-7 win potential or plateau and then get to the playoffs in 2026. The only team that's won fewer games over the last 2 years is the Carolina Panthers. All this team needs to do is to be able to continue to point in the right direction. And again, for me, that is playing important football. That's playing meaningful games. That's playing dramatic games, games that matter after Thanksgiving. And I think this team is capable of doing that this year.
That is the voice of Chris Price, Boston Globe. Chris, great to talk with you as always. Let's do it again real soon, okay?
Definitely. Sounds good, bud.
All right. That is Chris Price, once again, Boston Globe. You can find him on Twitter at @CPriceGlobe. And you can check out his stuff in the Globe whenever he writes it. And he's got a big thing coming up on Steph Diggs here, which I'm looking forward to reading.